Saudi Aramco, confined space procedure. Confined space entry within a Saudi Aramco-operated facility or at a project site after hydrocarbons have been introduced shall be in accordance with this chapter and local instructions. Confined space entry permit shall be issued in accordance with GI 2.100 prior to entry into a confined space located within a Saudi Aramco-operated facility or at a project site after hydrocarbons have been introduced. Other permits may be required, for example, hot work permit or cold work permit, depending on the type of work to be conducted within the confined space. For confined space entry performed only by personnel from a Saudi Aramco proponent department. An organization, for example, plant operations, the confined space entry permit shall be issued to a Saudi Aramco certified work permit receiver from the proponent department, an organization. For grassroots construction projects, contractors shall implement equivalent confined space entry permit procedures to ensure safe execution of construction activities. The contractor's confined space entry permit procedures shall be subject to approval by the Saudi Aramco proponent organization, SAPO. Every job that requires a confined space entry shall have a designated confined space entry supervisor, CSES. A standby man shall be assigned by the CSES at each designated entry point and shall continuously monitor the confined space entry while personnel are inside the confined space. In certain situations, for example, multiple entry and exit points, more than one confined space standby man is required. Standby men shall be provided with adequate means of communication, for example, two-way radio, to ensure continuous communication with entrance and with the proper personnel, for example, CSES, rescue team, in event of an emergency. At least one fire extinguisher, 30 pounds, shall be provided near each designated confined space entry point if the space is within process equipment, for example, vessel, column, tank, or where combustible or flammable material may be present, including residue, carbon dioxide, CO2. Type fire extinguishers shall not be used inside enclosed confined spaces. A confined space entry checklist, such as the Saudi Aramco checklist at the end of this chapter, shall be used by the CSES, etc., to help ensure Saudi Aramco requirements are met. Confined space standby men and entrance shall be physically fit for entry. Each designated confined space entry point shall be evaluated to ensure entrance can safely enter and exit the confined space. Designated entry points shall not be blocked or obstructed with equipment while entrants are inside the space, for example, air cooling and ventilation hoses blocking an entry point. The completed work permits, for example, confined space entry, hot work, confined space warning signs and barricades shall be posted outside the confined space to notify personnel that a confined space entry is in progress and to prohibit entry by unauthorized personnel. When the potential exists for persons or objects to fall into a confined space, additional warning signs and/or barricades shall be provided. Prior to entry, chemical and physical hazards shall be eliminated or controlled by one or more of the following methods: equipment isolation, for example, lockout and tagout, draining, water washing, steam cleaning, purging, etc. Mechanical ventilation, for example, air movers, shall be used to ensure removal of all hazardous airborne contaminants in confined spaces where a hazardous atmosphere exists or could develop during the course of planned work. Atmospheric gas testing shall be in accordance with GI 2.709. The proper personal protective equipment, PPE, shall be provided to personnel entering a confined space and to each standby man. PPE shall be continuously used during the confined space entry. Only properly trained and authorized personnel shall enter a confined space. Verification of training shall be made available upon request by the SAPO. Personnel entering and exiting a confined space shall sign a login and out sheet. See the Saudi Aramco log sheet at the end of this chapter. Ignition sources shall be eliminated or controlled within a confined space, if ignition sources are present, for example, sparks or open flames. A hot work permit shall be issued and periodic gas tests performed. Electrical equipment, including lighting, used in an electrically classified area, see Saudi Aramco ESB 068, shall be Underwriters Laboratories, UL, listed, Factory Mutual, FM, approved or equivalent. Electrical equipment, including radios, shall be in accordance with the electrical classification of the confined space and as per the requirements of GI 6.008 and Saudi Aramco ESB 068. Ground fault circuit interrupters, GFCIs, shall be utilized on all electrical powered equipment used inside a confined space regardless of the electrical classification of the space. Lighting shall be provided as needed to safely enter, exit and work inside a confined space. Lighting shall be on a separate electrical circuit from other electrical equipment and tools used in the confined space. If the confined space is within process equipment, for example, vessel, column, tank, or where combustible or flammable material may be present, including residue, portable lighting shall be rated for an electrical classification not less than Class 1, Zone 2 and shall not be used in the confined space without a hot work permit per GI 2.100, except explosion-proof flashlights. Hand tools and power tools. For further information on portable lighting, when electrical power cords are used inside a confined space, protection shall be provided near sharp edges and through entry points to prevent damage to the power cords. Compressed gas cylinders shall not be placed in a confined space. Internal combustion engines shall not be positioned inside a confined space or at a location that could allow exhaust to enter the space. This type of equipment shall be positioned downwind from confined space entry and exit points and air mover intakes. Personnel in an enclosed confined space where vertical rescue may be required, for example, inside a vessel, column, tank, shall wear a full body harness. Fall protection, for example, full body harness, and lanyard, scaffolding, shall be used if personnel could fall more than 1.8 meters 6 feet when working inside the confined space. Entrance to a process-related confined space or where movement is inhibited or difficult, for example, inside a vessel, column, tank, shall be given breaks as needed and allowed to rest outside in an open area. The CSES shall arrange these breaks accordingly. Heat stress. Flammable and combustible materials shall not be stored inside a confined space. Entry into a confined space where naturally occurring radioactive material, norm, contamination is known or suspected shall be subject to the following controls. An enclosed confined space, for example, vessel, column, tank, shall be mechanically ventilated for a minimum of 4 hours prior to entry. Personnel and equipment exiting the confined space shall be subject to a norm contamination survey. Personnel or equipment found to be contaminated with norm shall be segregated and decontaminated. Hazardous materials. Where hydroblasting operations are occurring inside a confined space, low-point drains shall remain open, car-sealed, to eliminate water accumulation. In the event of a confined space rescue, the confined space atmosphere shall be considered immediately dangerous to life or health, IDLH, and positive pressure, self-contained breathing apparatus, SCBA, or airline respirators with an emergency escape cylinder shall be used by all personnel entering the confined space. If the confined space entry activity is suspended, the entry points shall be barricaded and a no entry sign shall be posted. When work is complete and the confined space is ready to be returned to normal service, the confined space shall be inspected to ensure all equipment and tools have been removed, etc.